Welcome back. Speaking of the Spectrum, Season 2, Episode 222. We're back. New setup, new stories to share, new guests who we're going to have our first guest of the season in just a moment. As I previewed last time, he is the fastest autism super dad in the world. And we will preview him in just a minute. But before we get into that, quick reintroduction to the Duckamuck, my compadre, my partner in crime, Joe Templin. Joe, doing well? Hanging in there so far?
You know what? The horror persists, and so do I.
There you go. We're just not even Halloween yet. Did you see that line for Halloween season episode?
I'm getting in the mood. It's almost International Talk Like a Pirate Day, so that is absolutely critical.
We should do a Halloween episode.
Oh, we're definitely doing
it. Well, thank you all for still sticking with us, and share this with your friends and family. We keep things upbeat and fun, and it's always great being in the studio with Joe and our engineer and our guests. Before we get into things, a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, Joe and I both do represent a nonprofit, Autism Society Greater Hudson Region. We do a lot of cool things. We try to help folks in the families, with getting them resources. We help autistic adults with resourcing and getting them acclimated to daily life on their own. We have some fun events like our 5K that we do every year, our gala that we help to raise funds, many other sensory-friendly events we try to coordinate. And all of that requires your help, right? So the quickest way to get that to us, obviously, thank you for listening. Hit the like and subscribe button. That'll help us. But also go onto our website, asghr.org/podcast, and you'll see all our episodes too. But at the very top of it, there's a nice blue button that says donate. $5 or $10 goes a long way with us. So we'd really appreciate it. Thank you. And another housekeeping item, I mentioned this last time, we now have an email address. If you want to get in touch with Joe and I, shoot us an email with your thoughts or comments or grievances. Podcast. The email is podcast@asghr.org. So with that out of the way, Joe.
Well, we should thank our two sponsors,
yes,
too.
Thank you.
So
your turn to thank them.
Our newest sponsor, Pan Dermatology. Thank you, Teddy, and the staff over there. They do a great job if you have anything going on with your skin. And as usual, Pulse MD. If you bust yourself up, they can help put you back together. And I have lots of stories of busting myself up from this summer.
You should visit Pulse MD. They're not locally, but they've got 7 or 8. I think now with 8 branches now in the Hudson region. So
I could get like one of the cards like at the coffee shop, and every time you get punched, 10th one free. That'd be me.
What is it this time, Joe? You know where to go. Another fun thing we're going to try to do this season is go live. We're going to have a live episode where we're going to have a bunch of friends and folks and family and you, whoever, wherever you are, tune in for a few minutes. We'll be live trying to raise funds and, getting to interact with Joe and I. I think I'm looking forward to that. The date for that is TBD, still trying to get some of those logistics together. But stay tuned. Maybe we'll have the date ready by next episode. So one of the things, Joe, we introduced last episode or first episode, something we'll be doing this season is talking about, speaking of the spectrum, speaking the spectrum in different languages. So what we started doing is looking at what the word autism is in different languages and then deriving a meaning from that. Last season, we touched upon where the word autism came from, at least in English. This season, we're going to explore different languages. And as I promised last episode, I'm going to try to learn it in my own language, which is Urdu. And there's a few different ways of saying it. And I'm going to say those 3 words, and I'm going to try to explain them. And now you're going to understand how diverse my tongue is, because I can now switch from a different dialect now back to this. So words for Urdu are khud taskini, or khud fikri, or khud khayali. These are 3 different words. But the first part of that word is the same as you said, khud. Khud means self, right? It means oneself. And last season when we talked about the word for autism, it was very much like not lonely, but like, alone or yourself.
With the self.
Within the self. And I feel like as we're going to explore these words, we're going to, in different languages, I feel like we're going to see that theme happen. So all 3 words that I was able to dig up on a very lazy Google search, each of them started with khud, right? Self. But then the second part of that, so the first one is khud fikri, and the other is khud khayali. So fikr or fikri, where it is derived from, is one interpretation of the word is fikr is like, I'm worried, right? It's like a worry. But also it's more like pondering, right? So like you're you're self-pondering,
So
yourself.
deep self-reflection in some ways.
Yeah, right. So if I dive into that a minute, obviously, like my experience with autism is with my son, right? And when I'm wondering, sometimes he's sitting there on his own. He's in that state of khud fikri. He's like self-pondering on things, because sometimes I might think that he's staring into the void, but there's some calculations. There's something going on, and once he figures that out, then he steps out of it and goes to the next thing, right? And the other thing is khud. Khush khayali or khush khayali, which is khayali, and khayal means thought. So again, the same thing. Like khush is like happy or positive, right, or optimistic, and then thoughts is thinking and more of that, right, or thoughts. So it's again, you're kind of in your own
In his happy place.
in your happy place or in your mind, and you're trying to keep things positive. And when I thought about in your happy place as being like a singular state for his mind, right? Like you're only ever optimistic or happy, right? Like just let's take that for a moment. It connected me to something else that really, really inspired me as a parent, which was kind of taught about in Islam, right? And this was really profound and moving to me. I hope you all feel the same, but a lot of teaching in Islam, or scholars in Islam have said that there's enough evidence to support that evil doesn't touch the autistic child, right? Or the devil cannot reach the autistic child because their minds are so, like untouchable, because they're so into that
They're
state
pure.
of khud, that state of yourself. They're so pure, right? Now take that for a moment, right? Imagine there's an individual out there who evil and the devil can't touch. As a parent, God has appointed you to take care of that person. Like, to me, that is like a badge of honor. Like starting out as an autism parent, when you're like, you get that first diagnosis, I go back to that moment, it's like, oh my God, our lives are like this and that. What are we going to do? But then you hear something like that that's saying, God has appointed you to take care of somebody who evil cannot touch. You're guarding the person that is guarded from the devil, right? Like, that is a badge. That is like a crown. That is like, wow, like I don't
That's
need
an honor.
That's an honor. Like, I don't need to get, like an award sitting on my chair. Like, I have this, I can walk with this. And like, then the other part of it is I heard other imams and other scholars talk about, some people go to them and ask like, hey, my kid's turning older, he can't pray. Because, Islam, praying 5 times a day is kind of mandatory, right? Yep. And they all say like, the kid doesn't have to pray. Like, they're already like in heaven.
Yeah.
I talked about parenting autism parents, and like that kid is your ticket to heaven, but this kid's already there.
Nope.
You're just watching him until it's time to go.
Yeah.
Right. And
they're bringing you along. They're like dragging you in the red wheelbarrow.
But you have to do your job.
Yep.
Right. Like, you can't give up on them. It's hard. We talked about this last time. It's hard. You want to lose your temper, and I'm guilty of that myself. But there's times when you're like reminded of that saying. It's like, whoa. Like, even if you're not religious, even if you're not into Islam or whatever, just take that sentiment for a moment. You can't disagree with me that evil, like as an autistic person on the spectrum, right? Like, you would think that evil does not get to them. That's fantastic.
They just can't comprehend it.
You just can't comprehend
That's
that.
cool.
That's
really cool.
Yeah. No, thanks. So let's talk about hero of the day, then we'll get on to our guest of the day with a fact too. So you have a fact to share, Joe?
Do you want me to go with fact, or you want me to go with hero first?
Let's go with hero, whatever you like.
Let's go with the hero, because this summer was an Olympiad. And a lot of people know that the Olympics were in Paris, and it was awesome. But people in the United States tend to forget about the Paralympics. 160 plus countries represent in the Paralympics and like have massive amount of broadcasting and viewing on it. All like 85% of the viewership for the Olympics, that's the viewership for the Paralympics. And one of the most decorated Paralympians is Jessica-Jane Applegate. She's a British swimmer. She's won 24 gold medals.
Wow.
She is on the spectrum.
Wow. So Paralympics means you're physically impairment
or mentally impaired. And so she is the most decorated of all of Britain's Paralympic athletes. And she became an MBE, basically a huge word for the English. They're almost like being knighted for a female.
Oh, okay. And it was a swimmer, you said.
And she's a swimmer.
Swimmer, right? So we had this recurring theme last season too, right? Of the affinity of autistic individuals towards water. And the flip side of it is you got to make sure they don't drown in it, and there's like a risk there too. But how they're drawn towards water, and we talked about a few people last season too. But there's that theme again. It's like that water is like, you know, like not to take away from our own achievements. Like it's pretty fantastic. 24 gold medals. Wow.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And last session, we were talking about transition back to school. And one of the things, my son did Boy Scout camp, and he went up to Camp Reed, and one of our former board members, Mike Tripaldi, is on staff up there, former head of Waterfront, you know, heavily involved. And when I went up and I spent a bunch of time talking with Mike, he said that 25% of the staff this year were on the spectrum.
Wow.
So this idea that people on the spectrum might fall off the cliff, as we talked about last time, when they hit 18, there's things that they can't do. No, you know, you find the right space for them and they can be incredible contributors to society, whether it is as engineers, physicists, like I was used to dealing with at RPI, or in these volunteer leadership and development sort of organizations.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we should probably put a call on out and say, hey, the Autism Society of the Greater Hudson Region is always looking for volunteers. And whether you're on the spectrum or not, if you want to assist people in our community, we will always take you on in and find a way to put you to use.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks for sharing that one. You want to go to the fact, or should we skip over to our guest who's so patiently waiting, who I'm really eager to talk to?
Well, our guest and I were talking about this fact a little bit earlier. So diet actually has a direct impact on the severity of symptoms for people on the spectrum. So eat less crap, ladies and gentlemen. Less highly processed food, especially the energy drinks that teenagers love. My kids always are trying to get their hands on them. You know, that actually is one of the worst things for some of the symptoms that present with individuals on the spectrum. So find an alternative to that for them, and you will have a few less meltdowns.
Yeah. Same thing with chocolate.
I'm not going to say anything bad about chocolate.
Halloween's coming up. We can't say bad about chocolate.
We will investigate that.
We'll investigate. We'll come back. Further research is needed. All right. Getting on to our much anticipated, our first guest this season. We always have a great one first going out. So I told you this individual is the fastest autism super dad out there. It's certainly the fastest one I met, but that's because he literally goes 100 miles an hour. So Jordan Modiano, thank you so much for joining us. You are literally on a racetrack right now. I know you were on the news this morning. You're doing a bunch of things promoting your event. Tell us. I'm going to ask you about your origin story in a bit, because that's I think where I first heard from you when we first met a couple of years ago. But tell me what you're up to these days. What event are you building up to?
So what am I? Okay, great question. I'm up to a lot. But,
we like that kind of.
the biggest event. It's our third year. It's the Upstate Chevy Dealers' third annual Autism Acceptance Race. It's a car race. We hold it at Albany Saratoga Speedway. We do it to raise awareness, acceptance, and money for autism. And you know, it's our third year. It's a big event for the class of cars that I race. It is the largest paying event anywhere in the country. It's probably the largest paying event any time in history for this particular class of cars. And it makes an impact, and that's why we're doing it.
And you race them yourself. You're not just organized. You're actually in the race yourself.
I'm actually in the race myself. Yeah, you need a bunch of crazy people out there doing it. So you know, why not? Why not be out there doing that as well?
How crazy do you need to be? Because I like to drive, but I don't know if I'm crazy enough to drive on those tracks yet.
Go as fast as you can. Turn the car sideways. Slide with a bunch of other maniacs doing the same exact thing. Hope you don't crash too hard, and then keep going.
A little bit of crashing is expected.
Yeah, a little bit.
If you're not rubbing, you're not racing.
Yeah, there you go. Days of Thunder. Rubbin's racing.
So what's your origin story? How did you get connected to autism? And I know the answer, but let's share it.
So my little girl.
Yeah.
So Rachel, you know, we adopted Rachel.
Okay.
And somewhere at a relatively young age, my wife was able to pick up on some stuff. And we went and we had her tested, and, you know, she's got autism.
What age was she at this time?
what age did we?
Yeah.
Two and a half.
Yeah.
It was pretty young. So my wife's a school psychologist with her PhD. So she recognized some signs early on, and some of it was the stimming and some of the other stuff. And, you know, we went, and then it was one diagnosis after another. And, you know, you really don't know what you have until their personality starts to develop, and then you kind of get to see it, you know. So she's got autism, she's got anxiety, she's got ADHD, you know, and she's an adolescent. So we got the 4 A's. It makes life wonderful. But she's amazing.
Yeah, the first time I saw you was at our gala a couple of years ago that we call the Soiree for Autism that we host, and you were our honoree or our chief guest that day, and you gave a very moving talk about I think it was one story you told specifically about.
So you guys talk about heroes. So I shared the story about the day I met my hero.
Yeah.
And it was one of those really hot summer days, mid-July, and she might have been 3 at the time. And it was a Sunday, but it was one of those summer solstice days where the sun's high in the sky, the humidity's at like a maximum 1,000%. You're dying as soon as you step outside. That was the day. And I believe it was Cook Park in Colony was having a family fun day, and she wanted to go. So we drive over there in my black Chevy truck, because that's what I had at the time. And we park the car in the parking lot, and she grabs my hand, and we're walking towards the thing, and she's pulling me through the parking lot. And as we're getting closer, you know, she's got her hand up and she's pulling me. And as we're getting closer, it slows down a little bit. And now I'm kind of pulling her along, because she can hear the music and she can hear the roar from the motors of the bounce houses. And there's a dunk tank, and they've got a police officer sitting in the dunk tank, and kids are throwing the ball, and it hits the thing and it splashes. So there's noise, there's scenery, there's all of this. And
sensory spike.
oh my God, sensory spike like crazy. So, you know, she covers her ears, you know, and it's hands right over her ears. And we keep walking, not holding my hand anymore, kind of lagging behind. So I slow down, and we come around the back, and we're standing next to one of the bounce houses. There's another bounce house not far from us. A police officer in a dunk tank 15 feet in front of us, and 30 feet off to the right or so is face painting. And then there's pony rides in the back, and there's a band playing over on the other side. And she's dead frozen, hands covering her ears, eyes back and forth. And we're standing in the beating sun. 4 feet to the right of us is the shade. So I'm like, all right, I know she needs to get her bearings, right? So I shake her and I say, Rachel, let's go into the shade. No movement. Mm-hmm. Come on, Rachel, let's go in the shade. It's too hot to just stand in the sun. No movement. Wait another minute or two, and I do what any good parent's going to do. I go to pick her up to take her into the shade. That was my first mistake. She went ballistic. All right. Mm-hmm. She was louder than the music and the bounce houses and everything together. Everybody in the place stopped to look at this guy who's abducting this kid, obviously, right? Yeah. You know, the cops ready to pull their guns right out of the dunk tank. And like, all right, put her right down. She's my kid. It's okay. You know, everybody goes back to their stuff. And we stood there for an hour. Wow. 1 hour. I was drenched. It looked like I took a shower in my clothes. She was drenched. And at the end of the hour, and she's got her hands covered the whole time. Daddy, I'm ready to play now.
Wow.
And she goes 5 feet away from us. She goes over to the first bounce house, takes her shoes off, jumps into the bounce house, covers her ears, and jumps up and down for 2 minutes. Comes out of that bounce house, grabs her shoes, doesn't put them on, just in her socks, runs over to the next bounce house, jumps into there, 2 minutes. Comes out, grabs my hand. We walk around the whole place. Do you want to go for pony ride? No. Do you want to throw the ball and dunk the cop? No. Do you want to do face painting? No. Do you want to get something to eat? No. Do you want to see the mascot? She gets a quick picture with the mascot, and she wants to go home. Tired. 7 minutes of playtime. Mm-hmm. 7 minutes. We get in my truck, get the air conditioning going, and she's sound asleep before we're out of the parking lot. And I realized, what holy hell did she put herself through? something I can't even begin to imagine. To put everything in a place and compartmentalize it and make it all okay in her head to go play. And if at 3 she can do that, what are we all capable of? And that's the day I met my hero, because she turned into my hero that day. She's remained it the whole time, because she shows me all the time what I could do. Because I don't have autism. I don't have ADHD. I don't have struggle with anxiety. So she goes and does stuff, and it's like, I have no way to complain about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Your excuse is invalid.
It's invalid.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And what's really ironic in a beautiful way to me about that whole story is, you know, I think of you as like a race car driver. You're, like I said, you're the fastest dad, and it's all about pacing, right? And this is the other side of pacing, right? It's like you really got to pace yourself. It's because what's what the autistic individual is doing, and as parents, we got to pace ourselves. Pace isn't about speed, right? It's about compartmentalizing, like you said, digesting it, and giving the kid that time, right? Like in the beginning, for me, my son, it was like, hurry up and go play, like go push and go, and he's like running back. I don't want to do this, right? But now the more we're like just the example you said, you had the absolutely right way to do it was just let them take. It's going to take an hour to prep for 7 minutes of playtime. You know, as a professional project manager, that's like that doesn't work. Compute in my head, right? Right? That doesn't work. Like, or as an investor, that's like no. Right, but then I remember I'm an autism dad, right? It's like
you're a parent,
and that is
right? That formula goes out of way. Yeah,
best lesson that I've gotten being an autism dad is the patience for it.
Yeah,
and anybody who knows me knows I am not a patient human being.
Yep.
Either am I. My dad used to tell me you need to learn patience. Took me having a child to do that. I've also learned some other stuff, you know. People talk about having a bad day. And I heard a motivational speaker back in February do this, and I've incorporated this into my life, and I've incorporated it into Rachel's life. We don't longer have bad days. There's no such thing. Okay? Might have bad minutes. That's what we have.
Yeah.
We don't have bad days. And even on the worst of the worst, it's usually segmented for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. It seems horrifying and horrible, and you don't know what happened, but before it was good and after it was good. So we've turned it into the bad minutes. We're not letting it ruin the whole day. We're not letting it keep that effect.
Yeah.
And it becomes very rewarding when you think about it like that. It's like, okay, no, we're not saying we had a bad day. We had bad 15 minutes, but before that 16th one was pretty good. And the negative 15th one or whatever, however we go around that 15 was good too. So it does make a difference. And you learn all these different tactics.
Yeah.
Because there is no book. That's why it's a spectrum. Because what you deal with and what you deal with and what I deal with, while they might have some similarities and some of the same nuances, the reactions of our children are different to what we do and how we do it.
Yeah. And then also, I talked just last episode about how we had that incident where like the power went out for over 12 hours and we had to drive all the way to Boston to spend like the night at my sister-in-law's house. So once my friends got wind of that, right, we were blessed to have a nice closely knit society, a social circle. They started calling me like, "Hey, dude, it's like 11 o'clock. You're driving. Just come to my house." Or when they heard about the story the next day, they're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe what you had to go through." I'm like, "What are you talking about? There was a problem. We found a solution. It was bad for maybe a couple hours, but we got 12 good hours after that." Right. So like, it's almost the flip side of what I talked about. It's like the 90% of the prep was spent for 10% of the work. This was like 10% of the decision making and effort got the rest of the 90% through, and that's like, and like you said, you learn those tactics is like, you're going to have to flip the script sometimes and think about things a different way, and fight your own nature as a parent. Right. So maybe this is segueing into our other section. I don't think we touched on it, which is the Adam project. So if you like Ryan Reynolds, you know he had a time travel movie called The Adam Project. We're trying to get his attention to see if we can have him deliver us a cease and desist letter.
I was listening to your very last podcast, and you guys were talking about it, and I remember hearing you say, so either you're going to send us a big check or a cease and desist, but one way or another, we're getting your attention.
Yeah, we're going to get your attention. But this is Autism Dads and Moms Project. We try to get tips and tricks together, hear about it, discuss it with our guests and listeners and what have you. But I think for me, patience is it. Pacing the spectrum, right, is the Adam Project tip of the day for me. So you really got to pace yourself, adjust it, and however you want to do the math of what level of time investment or investment of patience you want to put into it, figure that out, and the result will come.
It's so funny you say that, because I think patience and sometimes just non-acceptance of a situation. So my daughter loves no. I'm not doing this, or no. And she'll tell you no as she's doing it. I'll say, can I get a hug, please? And as she's walking to me to give me a hug, she's telling me, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not into hugs anymore. And I get a great hug. It's just, those are those different things that we learn. And before I learned that, and what it took me the patience or the multiple experiences or whatever, I was like, how do I get her to say yes? I don't need her to say yes. In her head, she's saying yes, but for some reason or another, verbally, she needs to defy me.
Yeah.
We'll go back to the autism race. Last year, she was like, we need to leave. I'm not doing this. I can't do it. There's no way. I'm not doing it. She did an amazing job.
She did. I was there.
You were?
I've got a story for you from last year. So
I'm dying to hear it.
So that was during my tenure as president. In fact, that was one of my first big events as president. So Lisa and I are there hanging out, Lisa Audi, and doing everything. And the race had been rained out the initial date, so it was pushed to several weeks later. Right. And they stacked a whole bunch of races. So that race occurred at like 1 o'clock in the morning.
That was crazy. So that night, the year ends at Albany Saratoga Speedway with something called Malta Massive Weekend. It is the biggest weekend for multiple classes of racing. It's an amazing event. And for any of your listeners, local, they want to come out and see some great racing. You absolutely have to come to the autism race. But that's another great weekend. It's Friday and Saturday night. And we rescheduled ours for that Friday night. We weren't supposed to be racing that Friday night. They had enough without a major autism event. And we were supposed to start at 5 o'clock, and there were trucks and trailers with race cars in them parked out on Route 9 all the way down to the Ripe Tomato, half a mile away, lined up still waiting to get in. It was that crazy.
Yeah, so I got there about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, pulled on in the van, was there all afternoon with everything. We've finished the race and everything. It's late o'clock, and I'm like, all right, I got to leave because we have the autism walk the next day.
All right.
I go to the van, and I'm blocked in by a bunch of race trailers.
Classic Joe.
So what do? I sleep in the van. I just pretended it was a Ragnar. And at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, when I woke up after a couple hours of sleep, and it was freezing, I'm lying on the back because I had stuff in the van. And I wake on up. I was able to pull on out, so I stretched my legs because I was all in a fetal position, and I drove on out and drove on down to go to the autism walk. So I literally did autism related stuff for about 36 hours in a row.
Last episode, you had a story and adventure in your car too. I feel like if your car could talk, it would tell some stories.
Would we want to hear them?
Would we want to hear them? I don't know. We should try to just have that car as a mascot drive around your thing. Right? I think that Jordan, thanks so much for everything you do. Thanks for pointing everyone in our direction for for raising funds at your race. I saw you in the news this morning too, so really appreciate it. I know you're a motivational speaker. I'll definitely, reciprocate and follow you there too. I'm sure you'll have great stories to share. But everyone look him up. Like I said, he's an autism superdad. He's the fastest one out there. So with that, I think we'll wrap things up for this season, for this episode. Joe, you want to play us out?
Absolutely. And so, as our guest has shown us, we all have our own ways of being able to contribute and help our community. And the only way that we as a society are going to continue to evolve and get better is if we all keep speaking of the spectrum.